Hi everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Bede Brosnan. I'm from the School Attendance Policy team, and this is the first in a new set of school attendance webinars that we're running for the rest of this term actually, and they're aimed really at helping schools to prepare for the next academic year and next academic year's work. This first session is about specifically effective preparations for September and the things that you'll want to think about now. And we've got a particular focus actually on what schools can do to support pupils who are moving between year groups, so transitioning between years, and also moving from primary to secondary schools. Um, we've got a number of other training sessions that are coming up too. Quite a lot of these are actually about our updated attendance guidance. And as people on the call will be aware, that attendance guidance is becoming statutory in September. We're also looking to publish some quite interesting new attendance resources and some data tools over the coming months as well, which we hope will be of some use. But today's session, as I say, is focused on back to September, back to school preparations. Our first speaker will be Scott Walker, and he is a DfE attendance advisor, and he actually works with a number of schools and trusts around the country looking at their attendance practice. Then we've got Bernadette, executive head teacher from St Bede's Primary School in Stockton. And finally, we've got a couple of members of staff from secondary school, the St Paul's Way Trust School in London. And both of these schools, I should mention, are actually leading two of our recent school attendance hubs. So they'll be offering some kind of practical reflections on some of the things that they are thinking about over the summer term and through into September. At the end, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A as well. So please submit any questions that you want us to put, either policy questions that I'll be answering or questions that you want to put to the panel, and submit those please as we go along so we don't get a kind of big flurry at the end. But without further ado, I'll pass over now to Scott, who's going to kick us off and provide a bit of an overview. Scott.
Thanks, Will. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if you're like me, but you hate it at the point of view when you finish school in the summer and all the supermarkets start doing the back to school advertising campaign. I think that's what we're doing at the moment. So apologies if it seems very early, but we really think it's important to try and get a head start really in terms of planning for the transition for September. And we're hoping that you will take some of these ideas back to work with your teams in schools to smoother things ready for the new term. We often see that changing schools is an issue, but we shouldn't forget that changing year groups as well and within school can be difficult for some. And I was looking at some data recently, and it talked about the drop off in girls' attendance between Y7 and Y8 is actually more of a problem than the movement between Y6 and Year 7. So we're not just talking about moving schools; we are talking about the movement within individual schools. And obviously for some children, those changes of teachers can be quite difficult. And those that are prone to poor attendance might need some more support. There's also a large number of pupils that actually move school within the year. And I always wonder about their transition. I was in a school the other day that was talking about 60 or 70 children that would move in year. And often we're very keen to get them in the way of the game, get them into the curriculum and moving things forward. And we're not always quite so concerned about how their transition is managed in terms of the physical business of getting to school on time, and having a good attendance record. And equally, whether that information is shared with some of the teachers and key staff around there. What we know for certain is that relationships with some of these children and some of these families is absolutely key. It's easy to get wrong, and sometimes it can be hard to build. And I was in a conversation earlier this week with a colleague of mine, Carolyn Unstead, who's another advisor in the team. And I was talking about hard to reach parents. And she sort of stopped me in my tracks, and she talked about hard to reach schools. And I have to say, I felt a bit uncomfortable about that, because for schools, I know you always think you are easy to reach and easy to connect with. But I really think it's worth thinking about it from the parents' point of view, from the pupil's point of view. And sometimes we can be quite hard to reach. And I wonder how many people have done some parent voice or pupil voice about the induction processes and the transition processes. And certainly Carolyn's hard to reach schools phrase, as I've been thinking about a lot this week. Often we're dealing with parents who've had a difficult experience of school themselves, and therefore they come with all sorts of baggage. So working with those parents can be quite key to making sure that their children have a good start in school. We also know that primaries, as a generality, tend to have more effective relationships with parents than most secondaries do. It's often a closer relationship. And I just wonder whether some of the secondaries can start to capitalise on some of the work that they've done, and probably lead by some of their example. In all that plethora of information that we share at transition, I wonder how much information is shared about the children that have had support in terms of attendance, improving their attendance, and whether there's a need to continue some of that, whether they've met a regular person at a particular time, and how we're going to manage that transition between the two schools, and indeed if it's transition within year groups as well. So the big risk is that we miss out on some of this and the children go back to square one. And we always know that building that relationship back up and getting children back in the way of the game can be very difficult. So it's always important, if possible, for any link staff or key workers to actually meet the children in the receiving schools. I know a lot of primaries do visits down to primary schools, to nursery schools, to smooth that transition process. It's less common in some secondary schools, and particularly for the children that are doing okay academically, but just are anxious about the transition to school. And it's whether we can actually meet the children, probably at year 6 parents or something. And equally, the secondary school staff meeting the parents actually down in the primary school to smooth that transition. Can we do next slide, Katie, please? That messaging to parents is absolutely key, and lots of schools have got various attendance ladders, and I've started to collect these as I've gone around the schools. There's a couple on the screen at the moment that I think are particularly effective. The one on the left is from secondary. It's Western Fable Academy, part of Greenwood Academies Trust, and they've got these as big banners, roll-up banners at various strategic points around school that really hammer home the business of the importance of attendance. The one on the right was taken from a primary school up in the northeast, Hardwick Green Primary, part of the Enquire Learning Trust. Again, very, very similar. What I love about the one on the right there is the on track, at risk, and off track. And everybody has a policy about attendance. Parents generally don't read them. And I just think that some of these visuals are really, really useful in terms of hammering home the message about the importance of attendance. You'll also see that both of them not only talk about attendance, but talk about absence and talk about the missed time, missed lessons. Sometimes schools are starting to talk about, and parents don't always realise that 90% attendance is actually quite poor. Anything 90% in any other part of school is really quite good. So some of these visuals can be really important, and policy is one thing, but making the visuals relevant is useful as well. Next slide, Katie, please. So it's worthwhile taking some time now to think about the systems and what information is transferred and how much attendance is actually featuring as part of that. Simply, is the attendance info shared? And very often schools aren't sharing that in any great degree. And if it is shared, what are you doing with it in the receiving school? Lots of the information is shared as part of transition, centres around curriculum and curriculum change. But what about the support that children have had? It's important to remember, if children don't attend, then all the work you do in the curriculum could be a waste of time because they're not there to benefit. And it's not just about attainment and progress, is it? Schools do some brilliant work around personal development. And if children aren't in school, then they're not benefiting from the work that you're doing on personal development. There's a lot of work going on at the moment about identifying those that are at the risk of poor attendance and working with them as part of transition. And we'll talk to you shortly about this new part of the data tool, looking at bands of students. I'm always interested in the 88 to 92 percenters, those that are at severe risk of persistent attendance, persistent absence, and also the chance of pushing those back over the line and getting them back into the routines of school. And I'm sure that the tool that Will's going to talk about shortly might be useful to some of you. It's worthwhile trying to identify early on the ones that are likely to be challenging. Lots of schools tend to wait until week 2, week 3 of the September term before they start intervening with some of the students. And to actually identify some early and start some early work can be useful. The Children's Commission did some research a while ago and found that children that missed days in the first week were almost half as likely to become persistently absent later in the term. So the main message there is don't wait until the attendance drops before you act. And schools are also starting to look more at school-ready routines. It's about sort of the routes to school, getting uniform in place, how the children are going to cope with the transport changes and things like that. And those need to be key parts of the whole transition programme that schools are using. Some schools are doing some great work in getting their older students, Y5s and Y6s, for instance, to work with reception pupils, getting them into the way of the game. And equally, secondaries using Y8s and Y9s to work with Year 7s. And they're a great resource there and worth using. Next slide, Katie, please. It might be a good time now to think about the resources that you've got in school and how they're being used. And lots of schools that are struggling with attendance get sizable amounts of funding for pupil premium. And it might be worth you asking questions about how pupil premium funding is being used, what's it targeted for. And again, I find lots of PP money is actually spent on curriculum support and curriculum development. But again, if these children aren't coming to school in the first place, then that might be wasted. So it might be worth thinking whether you should be diverting some of that funding towards supporting that work on attendance as well. And as I've been around the country, I've talked to some absolutely brilliant people that are working face to face with these children, attendance teams, attendance officers in various schools that are building those relationships. And very often those people are term time only. And some schools are starting to think about the idea of flexible working for them, perhaps getting them in for some extra hours at certain times, maybe in the run up to September. What about just before Christmas and or the start back after Christmas and the start back after Easter? But even some schools are looking at it at half terms as well, to make sure that some of these parents have got that encouragement, the children are back in the way of the game and they know that school's starting. Lots of schools are using automated texts, worthwhile thinking whether they're working, but I wonder how many of your pupils might appreciate a phone call or something. And again, using some of those regular key workers that are working with pupils on a regular basis can be really useful in those encouraging calls just before a start back to school. And some schools, again, are still running holiday clubs and things which help to get pupils more in the way of regular attendance. Next slide, Katie, please. And we're also at the time of year where we're looking towards next year and planning the diary. And it's something that you may want to talk to senior colleagues around and even the trust, because certain trusts start dictating certain parts of the calendar. And we also know that part weeks often mean poorer attendance. So thinking about how your inset days are planned, lots of schools are moving away from midweek inset, but it's very interesting that we have this seminar today on a day when it's polling day and lots of schools are closed because they are polling stations. And if that's the case in your school, is it possible to find alternatives for polling rather than using the school and having to close school? I really genuinely fear for attendance tomorrow because children will have done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. For some children, they'll be off today. Is it worth coming back tomorrow, bearing in mind they're off on Monday for Bank Holiday Monday as well? So trying to spot some of those issues where you might have part weeks and what are you going to do to try and incentivize good attendance on those days might be worth thinking about now. And I throw the last one in quite provocatively. How purposeful are the last days? We've got some parents that are taking extended holiday and will take some holiday around the ends of terms. And I always think it's worthwhile making sure that those last few days before term breaks, particularly when it's a split week, can be really useful. I'm going to hand back to Will now, who's going to take you through part of the new data attendance tool.
Thanks, Scott. That was a really helpful overview. If I could get the next slide as well, please. So yeah, I wanted to take 2 minutes to briefly mention a bit more about one of the new data tools that we've just released. And this is really about helping schools to explore patterns of absence and attendance in more granular detail, and perhaps understanding a bit more detail some of the profile of absence in their school in order to take action, if in fact you don't already do this through your kind of existing MIS system and provider. If I can get the next slide, please. So yeah, we've published a new tool. This is the page that you'll see when you log on, which is on the dashboard. And here you can see we've got different bands of absence. So we've got the school, the kind of school's overall attendance broken down by 5 percentage point bands, all the way up to 50% absence rate. And you can see the number of pupils that are sitting in each band of absence. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see there are different filters that you can apply to dig into what this actually looks like for different groups. If I can get the next slide again, please. So when you actually click on one of these bands, you get a more detailed breakdown of all of the pupils, the individual pupils who are in this band of absence, broken down by attendance rate, year group, pupil name, etc., so that you can see which pupils are in what bands of absence. And if I can get the final slide. So yeah, we think this has the capacity to be quite helpful actually for schools to be able to do some analysis ahead of the summer break, over the summer term, perhaps to identify pupils or groups of pupils who might need some extra support from the beginning of the next academic year. But it's also something that we think perhaps in September schools can start using to identify and track emerging patterns of absence too. So we'd really encourage you to take a look, to start using the tool, to use it if you can over the summer term, and to start thinking about what does the distribution, if you like, of your school's absence problem look like, and where might you want to concentrate most of your efforts. So that's the first in a kind of number of tools that I alluded to at the beginning, of data tools specifically that I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, that we're releasing over the coming months. And as I say, we'd encourage you to have a look and make use of those. Bernie, I'm handing over to you now, I think. So Bernie's from executive head teacher at St Bede's Catholic Academy, and she's going to be talking about her school's thoughts and reflections as we approach the summer holiday period.
Hi everybody. My name's Bernadette Ritchie-Allen and I'm up in the northeast of England. Just a little bit of context about St Bede's. We're in on the banks of the River Tees. We are very close to where Benefit Street was filmed, and Panorama filmed here a little while ago. We are in an area of high deprivation. It's a wonderful area, but an area of real high deprivation. But attendance has always been one of our most important things that we focused on, because I feel the disadvantaged are the ones least likely to take advantage of the opportunities that they are offered. So that's why it's a huge push in our school. So if you move on to the next slide. The data that Will was talking about as we speak, or 20 minutes before this, we were looking at that dashboard, and it is a really, really fantastic tool. Sarah Alton, my excellent PSA, who does a lot of work with attendance, was actually drilling down on that dashboard, and we were already working out how many days children need to attend to get that 90% plus of our targeted children. It is a really simple tool to use and it's very intuitive, so I do recommend it. But this is the time of year we are starting to think really, really hard about attendance. We're not taking our foot off the pedal. So if you just move on to the next slide. What we're trying to do is see the problems coming ahead of us, and we already know the sort of the frequent flyers are problem, and our our families that are very difficult. If there were poor attenders this year, it's historically likely to continue. So you need to be working right up onto the final day of term and still having those meetings and starting to think about the the reception allocation, your nursery waiting lists, and so on. I'm a great believer in checking the impact of something, our pupil premium money, and we do get a lot of that because we are over 50%. It's what are we doing, and is it making a difference? Because if it's not and it's having no impact, we need to change it very quickly. So do what you've always done and you'll get what you've always got. So you need to be intuitive, you need to be creative, and you need to be brave when you're tackling attendance. It doesn't make you popular, but some of these are the things that we are doing in the lead up to the end of this academic year, over the summer holidays and into September. So these are just my thoughts, all just splurged down on the next slide, really. So priorities in the summer and early autumn term. Expectations are set out really, really early on before the children break up, and it's the last thing that we share with the parents at the end of the academic year. So we've already identified all the families below 90%, and we always talk about the 5 whys. Why are they the worst attenders? And you need to keep pushing. And that's when that's about the relationships with the families, and you need to start unpicking why they're not attending. We write to them and we ask them to come in for a meeting, and we try and unpick in the best and the most gentlest way possible, where we can, why they're not doing that. And it has to be a senior leader, it has to be the head teacher, ideally with a PSA, and you try and unpick why they haven't come to school. One of the things that we do in St Bede's, and I wanted to put the slides on of the children, is we give all the children in school a piece of uniform that makes our uniform distinctive, because we want to give them the status they don't necessarily have. So all the children have a free blazer or free jumper. That comes out of our pupil premium, simply because if they're not pupil premium, they're working poor invariably. And that also takes the ease and the stress of the summer holidays out. So they know before they leave school, the children are already fully kitted up. We target our family so we know that the uniform is ready there for them. And that just takes the stress away, including the more expensive items like shoes and things like that. And again, we use our pupil premium money for that. We give positive, encouraging messages over the holidays, so we're constantly keeping in touch via our messaging system, Dojo. So in the summer, we write and we meet all of the pre-5 children with poor attendance to talk about their attendance habits that are formed. So all the children who are in our nursery classes and our pre-5s, right throughout the year, we know it's not statutory school age, but we know that if they don't attend nursery or reception before the 5, invariably they don't attend school. It's just a pattern that we see time and time again. We have letters that we send to them telling them that you're forming bad habits. We're not a babysitter. EYF is the foundation to your children's learning. So we already know, and we can see from the age of 3 who are on our radar, and we're tracking those children. They're our vulnerable children, and we track them really, really closely. And we do bring nursery parents in, and we do bring reception parents in to say, they're meant to be at school, and we don't let them know that statutory school age is pre-5. They don't need to know that. They need just to know that they're at school and they need to come to school. There's a really early contact with our new nursery children. We go to the homes and we talk about our expectations, and we don't talk about 90%, we talk about 95%, and we talk about that in terms of school days to them, because I'm really glad it was mentioned that they don't understand percentages, or the message doesn't hit home. At our in June, July, we have attendance meeting, reception, new starters meetings, and a huge part of that is about why your child needs to come to school and why your child should not be late every day. And we absolutely this year are going to share with those parents the new regulations that are coming in. We also have letters where we identify patterns. So we have a letter that says your child is often off with their sibling, or your child is often off on a Thursday or a Friday or some other days. Be really forensic about that and ask for the 5 whys, because if you apply that rule, when we've done that before, we've linked it with people having to present to the job centre, and the school is on the way. So every 2 weeks, this child was off because mum didn't want to have to track back. One child wasn't able to come to school because he didn't like PE because he had no underwear. So be really forensic about that and challenge, state that there's a pattern, and this pattern's not a coincidence. We have created a new information leaflet and a letter informing the parents of the new fixed penalty notice information from mid-August. We're aware there's a campaign against it, but we are going to share that letter with our parents very, very soon, and we'll just take a big deep breath and wait for the onslaught of shouts, I think. So all teachers are expected to articulate the impact of poor attendance on their learning via the school report at the end of the year, and in every single parents' evening. So it's their child's attendance is shared with them at parents' evening and in the school report, and the school report has the attendance diamond we use, and it's really clearly and robustly stated that their poor attendance has had an impact on their learning and progress. Spending some time with your teachers, showing them how they can monitor their own classes attendance or tutor groups attendance is really important. Attendance is a team sport. Every single teacher should know how to track a child's attendance and see the impact and bring that to you if you're particularly in a larger school. One of the things that we don't do is have any grace period whatsoever. So within 3 days, if a child is not in school, they are below 90%. Very, very often when I go to heads meetings, I do hear, oh, well, the 90%, it's only because they've had a week off and we're only the 3rd week in and it'll pan out. Well, invariably it doesn't pan out. And if they're going to be off after 6 or 7 weeks off in September, they're likely to be off again. That to me is a little bit of a message, is they're not taking it seriously. So we absolutely challenge parents within the first week. And if the children don't turn up on the first day, we are home visiting. So please don't give them any grace period, because it just sends the wrong message out. You know who your frequent flyers are, and I'm really quite strict, and I do issue fixed penalty notice to all families who are taking holidays in term times. There are some really rare exceptions, like families of forces children and so on and so forth, but we do fixed penalty notice, and again that depends on your local authority, but Stockton is really robust with their fixed penalty notice and their support. What we try to do as well is front load lots of really good experiences for children in September, and we're shouting about it in the summer holidays. And we do the transition from classes from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2, and from nursery to reception and into secondary school. We get the transition is just more than once, and there's an enhanced transition, and children with enhanced transition, particularly secondary school, shouldn't be the children who are just your SEN children or your EHCP children, should be the children who are your poor attenders as well. And something that we haven't done really well this year, but I really want to make sure I'm doing it. I want to remain in contact with our families in year 7 and start a dialogue that maybe if our year 7 children who, you know, were our children who were below 90 or hovering around about 93 and lower, that keep in contact with the secondary school, because you do, primary schools have good relationship with parents and they know their families, and they'll often, they might listen to you because it's a familiar face. So work in harmony with your the PSA, the pastoral care, the heads of year in year 7. So that's something that we're going to really start to do in September, work more closely within our secondary school. So then my penultimate slide, could you put the next slide on, please? Thank you. So talk to parents in languages and contexts they can understand. So 90% in the real world is great. 90% in a degree equates to a first. When you tell parents that their child is 90%, actually they think that's not too bad. They don't realise that. So we try and keep it away from the percentage terms. We say to them, do you realise your child's off every half term 3 days? And an 80% absence is 38 days. And when I talk to the parents, and when our PSA talks to the parents, it's, do you work? Invariably they do. Right. So are you, transfer this to the working world. What would your boss be saying to you if you were missing a day off a week, or you were missing 3 days off every 6 weeks, and you invariably say, I'd be dismissed, I would be disciplined, or whatever. So we're saying, well, you're teaching your children that this is okay to do, because here's the heads up, the working world and the big bad world out there isn't like that. You're teaching them bad habits. So we share really, really clearly with the parents of poor attenders the impact of poor attendance early in the year. It forms bad. We tell them that the children are forming bad habits, and they're forming bad habits. It's giving them a lack of resilience and an excuse culture. We use the phrase to the parents, the need to power through it. The need to power through the headache, the cough, the cold. We're all parents ourselves. We know when a child's ill, we can message you and let you know that they're fine or not. And this is particularly pertinent to younger children, and particularly parents of first-time parents where they haven't been, the last experience of school when they were in school, they didn't know they had to be in school. They have to be in school, you know, regularly. So it's really clear that you tell them the impact, and you have to be really direct with your language. You have to be compassionate, but you also have to be really direct. We speak to the parents of those who've had day offers in September. We send them letters, and we target and challenge very, very quickly. So remember, a percentage is really ambiguous to parents, so please don't do that. What I do say to our parents is, do you realise you are parenting your child? Your child's education is currently part-time. You are sending your children to school on a part-time basis, and that's not acceptable. It's hugely damaging to them, and it's unacceptable. So we tell them to put that helmet on. 2 initiatives that I'm going to try in the next couple of months and going into September. So we're now going to ask parents, we're writing to them and to explain, we're going to bring them into a meeting, and we're going to ask them to explain how they are planning to catch up their child's missed learning due to the holidays they are going to take in July and September. So we'll be writing to them, asking them to come in, saying, right, you are taking 2 weeks out of term, what are you going to do about that? You tell me your plan for because we're not going to be sending work off to the Algarve or whatever, but what are you going to do about that? And I think I'm going to try it. I know it's not going to make me popular, but I think the responsibility needs to be pushed back onto the parents. And we're now sending out an early warning letter to this in the next couple of weeks, and a much more robust letter about the fixed penalty notice and sanctions in the next few weeks, because I think some parents have no idea what's happening. And if you have parents that are taking time off in September and then July or Easter, this is really going to have an impact. We do lots and lots of wonderful things behind the scenes to help with their mental health and their the need to come to school. We do residentials from year 3. We have private speech and language therapists, and we have private counsellors and occupational therapists that are pupil premium pay for. We work with dozens of agencies, and we're not shy in coming forward, but it's that mixture of robustly challenge them, but also throwing a protective net around them. But ultimately, they need to come to school. And that's the message that St. Bede sends out every single week. So that's just a few of the things that we're doing and we are planning to do. So I hope it's helpful. I think I'm finished, if any. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bernie. I'm handing over now to Firdousi from St Paul's Way Trust School, head of school there, who's going to introduce this segment.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share some of what we do in this forum. I hope everyone can hear me properly. So if we could start with the first slide for St Paul's Way, please. So I'm Firdousi, and I'm the head teacher for the secondary school and the sixth form. And with me today, I also have my colleague Owen Williams, who is one of our senior leaders and who is also our DSL. And our attendance lead. So I'll start off and then I'll hand over to Owen. In terms of our school context, every school has its own very specific context, and actually our context in terms of levels of deprivation and sort of the community factors is not very different to what sort of Bernadette described for the primary school example shared. So we're a very large secondary school in East London. We are in a high area of deprivation. We benefit from being part of a very small trust called the University Schools Trust, and therefore we have access to sort of additional support that comes to us through the trust and the number of partners that the trust has. The trust is quite uniquely situated in that it's a trust with quite a high number of higher education partners, and therefore a key part of our work that we do as a secondary school is sort of really connected in that sense of aspiration with the work that we do with families and young people to really engage them in the schooling process. As you'll see from the slide on the screen, over half of our students are PP, and a significant portion of our students are also EHCP, currently sitting at just over 10%, and this should probably be going up to about 11% from September, based on the number of year 6, sort of the number of applications we've had and consultations that we've had. You'll also see from the screen the attendance figures for the last academic year, and you'll notice that we have consistently been above local and national averages, particularly for the vulnerable groups such as sort of the PP and the EHCP. Now, what sort of helps us maintain this level, and we very much recognise that this is, every school works extremely hard with the systems and the context that is particular to each school, and therefore there'll be things that will work that will work better in some schools than others. We'd like to share a few of the things that we found have worked for us. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of sort of what we call our key ingredients, the things that have worked well for us within our context to secure sort of high attendance, is there outlined on the slides. And then when I hand over to Owen will go into more detail with each of those. I think very similar approach to what's been shared by both Scott and Bernadette so far, this idea of really being forensic, this idea of really thinking about robust challenge as well as support, and really enhancing that package so that you're engaging the families and the young people. And that's been very much core to what we sort of the approach that we've taken. So firstly, we embed attendance into our school culture at every opportunity, and we use all the platforms that are available for us. And again, shortly Owen will talk you through some of those, what we call our cultural platforms. Key to what we do is that real engagement with students and families, really focusing on strategies that develop a strong sense of belonging and connection. And some colleagues on the session today may have read some of the recent reports around the sort of the power of generating a sense of belonging in order to have that impact around attendance. And we've really thought about how we want to sort of engage parents and have that parental engagement for students to want to come to school, and then provide that support for students and that engagement at school level so that they want to keep coming to school. A key strategy that we've approached, and going back to what Scott has said, a lot of our PP funding is used very much to help support staffing, to create that staffing capacity and support for attendance by having a largely predominantly non-teaching pastoral team. So we are in a lucky position currently, though I know, like every school, we will also be reviewing our systems in the near future. But currently we are in a really lucky position to have had we've got 2 colleagues dedicated to each year group, and one of those colleagues is always a non-teaching member of staff. So that's been really helpful, and for us, funding that through the PP funding has been a deliberate decision. We also really wanted to make sure that we had rigorous systems and processes that we put in place to really be able to forensically drill down into the detail and do the tracking and the follow-up. And of course, referencing what I said earlier, building on excellent relationships with students and their families, really helping both students and families understand the issues at play, and also the system. Similar to what was mentioned, we have a large number of families who are first-time parents, or also families who are new to the UK system, and therefore it's really important to help them understand how the system works and what we're expecting in terms of attendance. Moving on, the sort of next key ingredient that we found really has made a difference for us is really looking at the interventions that we run and really making sure that those interventions are evidence-based interventions, and that we're continuously and regularly reviewing their impact and effectiveness. Again, dedicating a significant amount of staff time and hence funding to the interventions. It's only fair and right that we make sure we're continuously tracking the impact of that and tweaking as we need to. And then based on those evidence-based interventions and the work that we do with our staff, we are then able to identify those families who need the more bespoke support and the students who need the more bespoke support. And therefore, we really try and provide a sort of a high level of personalised support to each family, so that, again, we can really work on those factors that are impacting on those families and those young people, and thinking about how best we can support in bringing them in and continuing that drive around attendance. So that was just an overview of the key ingredients overall. What I'm going to do now is hand over to my colleague Owen, who will take you through some of the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Bede. So in the limited time I've got today, I thought it'd be helpful to try and provide you some quick wins that you could potentially implement in time for September. For example, we talked about cultural platforms, and of course, all schools, you'll have your own cultural platforms that you use. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of ours that we use that are on the slide today to tell you about how we use them to promote high attendance here at St Paul's Way. So firstly, our Year 6 transition programme. So firstly, we go out to all our different feeder primary schools, and in those kind of meetings that we have with the primary schools where we ask them about the students that are going to be coming to our school, we make sure we ask, who are your PA students? Who is it that gets support from the primary school? And then we look if they are things that we can replicate in school, or we need to consider new strategies for them. We then hold one-to-one meetings for all families that are going to be coming. They have a one-to-one meeting with a member of staff, and within that conversation, the member of staff talks to them about attendance, what their attendance was like at primary school, and about the importance we place on attendance here at St Paul's Way. We then have a day where there is a taster day session for all of the students, and built into that programme is a session which talks about why attendance is important and that benefits of attendance. So yes, there is the academic benefits, but when you're talking to Year 7 children, you also need to make sure that you're also including the social and emotional benefits, that connectivity with friends that is really important of having high attendance. On that very same day that the children are having their session within school, we hold a parent session at the same point as well. And in that session, we go through all of our attendance processes and all of our expectations around attendance there. So already before the child's even been enrolled in the school and come on roll, you've got a real emphasis on that culture that we want to create of high attendance with students and parents as well. Early on in September, kind of late September, early on in their journey in the school, we then hold a settling in evening, which is a face-to-face meeting for all parents with their form tutor. And this is an opportunity, if there have been those early concerns that the previous colleagues have talked about, then we can address them straight away and see if there's anything additional we need to do for any students who are struggling to settle in at the school. The next one I'm going to talk about is our student entry to school. So again, the previous colleagues have talked a lot about relationships and the importance of relationships between students and members of staff. We make sure that we have our pastoral leaders on the entrance gates, greeting each student and interacting with parents as they come into the school. This enables us to show to the student and the parent that we generally care to them, and we show an interest in them as individuals, having conversations. And of course, also the pastoral leaders will know who's been absent in the previous day, and they can check up on them and see if they're okay and if they need those additional support. The other benefit of this approach is that when students come in, they know that if they do have any issues, for example, if they had any peer issues or problems in school, they know that as they walk in the morning, they're going to have the right people available to them. They're going to have the head of year, the deputy head of year, the safeguarding team, anyone is available that they can go and speak about those problems when they come into school, which then avoids students having to take time off school. Parents call up, students can access that support straight away. The next one I'm going to talk about is lineups. So some schools will use lineups as a form of transition, and other schools will have different models. But we use lineups first thing in the morning, after break, and after lunch. And what we do, one of the main reasons we do for this, as well as the calmness of transitions around the school, it is also an amazing cultural platform to us for the head of year to speak to their year group 3 times per day. In particular, we reserve our Tuesday morning lineup to have an attendance focus. And how that runs is that firstly, we celebrate the top 3 form groups from the week before. And we remind students about how having such high attendance contributes to the form group half-termly competition and the reward that they receive at the end of that. The next thing they do is they try and highlight a student who's shown real great resilience throughout that week. So an example would be a student who might have gone to the medical room because they were unwell with a headache, but actually rather than going home, they'd stayed in school, persevered throughout the day, throughout the week. So the head of year would highlight that as, you know, really good character and something that we want students to aspire to. The final section will be that they would highlight any cohort priorities or important events that are upcoming. So for example, if there's any like cohort-wide workshops, any interform competitions, or anything upcoming assessments or revision resources that are being shared, these are all highlighted at that morning lineup to make sure that students know how important it is that they're in school throughout the rest of the week. The final platform to mention is how we use tutor time. So on a Monday tutor time, each form tutor will speak to each individual student and tell them what their year-to-date attendance percentage is. Students then record that attendance percentage in their planner, and they also record if their attendance is going up or down. And if there have been absences throughout the week, the tutor is able to have that one-on-one conversation with them to show that awareness, firstly, that they've been absent and that they were missed when they weren't in school, and then offer that care and support which students really value in terms of their relationships. They can also talk to them about any missed announcements, cohort priorities, and then also make sure if they're worried about any homework or anything that's been missed, then the tutor can support them and put their mind at ease. Okay, go to next slide, please. The next part that I'm going to talk about today, again, is what we call our step support model, and also, again, building on that idea of our relationships. So firstly, our daily absence procedure. So if a child is absent, every child would receive a phone call on day 1 of that absence. And the people that we get to do that are our year team. So our deputy heads of year who know those child best, they're the people that make the phone calls, and we protect time for them across the school for period 1 to make sure all those phone calls are done in a really prompt way. The reason we do that is that what we've experienced is that when those phone calls are made, parents want to know that the person they're talking to them knows their child directly and has that care for them. Previously, when we've used admin staff, parents have often asked the question, do you know my child? So we make sure that the people making those calls really know that child and can engage with the parent. It's also effective because if a parent calls up and says that there's a problem such as peer issue or a reason why that child can't be at school, then again, they're talking to the right person and that person can resolve that issue or start to resolve that issue in that phone call, and the student can come into school that same day rather than messages having to be passed around and the child potentially stay at home for that day. The next thing we do are home visits. So firstly, we do home visits, what we call morning door knocks in the morning. So our attendance officers, before they come into work on their commute in, they go out and they door knock different families. And they do this to make sure that people are up and they're getting ready and they're on their way to school. And families really benefit this. We tell them in advance that we're going to be doing it, so it's not a shock to them. And families actually really appreciate the support that's offered for that. The next thing is that if a child is absent for 3 days, even if the parent has phoned in and given the reason for absence, we still go out and make a home visit. And again, we're really upfront with parents that this is part of our attendance approach. So if your child is absent for 3 days, this is what we will be doing. And we do that as a kind of welfare check to check that the child's okay. And again, parents find that really supportive, that we're going out of our way to go that extra mile and do those home visits. But of course, when the member of staff goes round, they can also make that judgment that actually should that child be in school and provide that level of challenge if it is needed. If students' attendance starts to drop, we have a stepped process in terms of support. So our first stage is that we send a letter out. The second stage is a meeting with the deputy head of year, and that then goes to a third stage of a meeting with the head of year before then passing on to our kind of attendance and welfare officer. In those meetings, you've heard from my colleagues there about kind of not using percentages and focusing on the amount of days. And also for us, we focus on the amount of lessons missed. So if you've got 30 lessons in a week and a child has missed 20 days or 4 weeks of school, we're talking about 120 missed lessons. And parents really resonate with that amount of time when you talk about missed learning and the impact that will have for approaching their kind of GCSEs. We also link it to the research around outcomes and about the impact that attendance has on outcomes using the kind of specific data that's available. And again, the benefits of socially and emotionally for each child as well. Within that meeting, we're then looking at how we can support, and we're setting really clear targets for that child and family. So overall, those principles of those meetings, we're unpicking barriers. We're trying to find out and dig really deep into why those children aren't coming to school. We're then providing high levels of bespoke support for in school, but we're also setting targets and responsibilities for parents. So this could be as simple as, if a child is persistently late, then it's about how is that parent going to make sure that their child is coming to school on time? Are they getting them an alarm clock and making sure they're setting it up? Are they going into the bedroom and making sure they're up? And then in the next meeting, if it escalates to that stage 3 meeting, we're then holding parents to account and we're asking, these are the actions we agreed as a school that we would do. We've done our actions. What are the actions that you had as a family, and have you done them as well to support your child and make sure that they're attending school? The final thing on this slide is preemptive communication. So before the start of each term, we make sure that we're reserving staff time and resource available. So for example, on our inset days in September, for them to review the data, look back to the previous year and see who was it that was absent in that first week after September last year, and who is it that was a PA student this year. And then they're making sure that our pastoral leaders are making contact with those families and checking that their child is ready to come to school. So part of that might be just making sure that the parent is aware of the right date that they're coming back, and like we say, the uniform has been purchased and they're ready to come straight into school. But it can also be that students might have anxieties. A 6-week break is a really long time for students because, as we know, students like routines. And when they've been out of those routines, they then might struggle to go straight back into them. So that phone call can be used to reassure the students that what it's going to be like when they come back. If students want to come into the school on those inset days, just to step foot in the building and speak to key members of staff, see some of their teachers, they're able to do that. And some examples might be, a year 10 student who is worried about starting their GCSE options or worried about the kind of what teachers they're going to be with. They can have that communication with that pastoral leader. Or again, if a student's had a peer issue over the 6-week holiday, then they can make sure that they discuss that with the pastoral leader so that they're ready to then come into school. The final section to talk about today is our interventions and what are the interventions that we run within school. So one of them is focus groups. So a focus group, we select 15 students across the cohort. We try and target students for this who aren't persistently absent. So it's more students who have kind of 90 to 93% attendance. And we try to make sure that every week they have a check-in with a member of staff who can discuss any barriers that might stop them attending. And at the end, we celebrate progress by giving them a reward if their attendance has improved significantly. We then have our Key Stage 3 mentoring program. So this is targeted at PA students. So it's all about establishing a key worker who has that regular contact with them. If they ever have any problems, they know they've got this one individual who they can go to. And also if they're not in, their key worker can also go and make a home visit for them. So a range of different staff are used for this, from our student support assistants, our attendance officers, our HLTAs, and we also really focus on our external services, being involved with the local youth services, and when they come in, they can also deliver this mentoring service. The final program that we have is our Key Stage 4 text message strategy. So research from Dorrington Research School and also the EEF show the benefit of text messaging strategies to students and parents to nudge high attendance. So how we do this is we send 2 texts per week. The first one is on a Monday morning, and we say to students, we're really looking forward to seeing you in school. We have this upcoming event, such as we have this really important workshop this week, for you to make sure you're in school. Or we might just say, we're really looking forward to seeing you in school today. Your fellow students have attendance of 96%, and they're really improving their chances of doing well in their GCSEs. At the end of the week, we send a second text message, and we make sure this is really personalised. So we'll say, congratulations on having 100% attendance this week. Attending school every day has really helped you to make a big difference in achieving your GCSEs. So that is some of the kind of quick wins that you could think about implementing in time for September. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll hand back over to the team.
Thanks, Owen. That's great. Really helpful overview. We're moving on to Q&A now, and we'll pick up questions that have already come through, although if there are some questions that's still coming in, we can pick some of those up too. The first one that's in the chat here, Owen, is about rewards and your approach to rewards. So perhaps you can take that one to begin with, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so 2 different ways that we do rewards. Firstly, I talked about focus groups and having that group of 15 students, and if that's students, we run them over a half term. And if they significantly increase their attendance over that half term, then they get invited to our form group party that takes place in the last week of each half term. And then similarly, the top form group from every year, they have a form group party where we buy them a couple of pizzas, and we have a laid back environment, and students absolutely love it. And it creates a real sense of togetherness in the tutor group. There's that real build up of consistently telling them how they're doing over that half term. And they absolutely love that reward at the end of the half term. We also do use attendance badges as well. Some schools will have a really good culture of students liking reward badges. For other cohorts, sometimes it just doesn't work. So predominantly we find it's really effective at Key Stage 3 in particular. So, particularly with our Year 7s. So we just have a simple process of if you've got 100% for the autumn term, you get bronze. If you still got 100% by spring, then you get silver. And then if you manage the whole year, then you get a gold attendance badge.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And another quick one, perhaps, which is who sends out the automated text message, or not the automated, but rather the personalised Key Stage 4 text messages? And they're asking, is it head of year, attendance officer, etc.?
Yeah, so it's our attendance officer for that one. So we only use them for Key Stage 4, and it's a select group of PA students. The thing I missed out there is that we send the message to the student and the parent as well. So it's a multifaceted approach. It's the same message that go out. We make sure that we tell parents in advance that that's what we're doing, and that's the only way that we use the student's phone number is via that text message. And it's our attendance officer. We have a number of templates. So the head of year will contribute to the wording to kind of give the idea of what are those kind of cohort priorities that are upcoming. And then the attendance officer then uses those templates to send out the text messages.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've got C. Chapman, who asks, which was the primary school that the head teacher was from, please? Great advice. I would love to look at their website. So Bernie, it's St. Bede's Catholic Academy.
Hi, it's St. Bede's Catholic Academy in Stockton-on-Tees. There is an attendance hub link on there, but obviously you have to sign up for the attendance hub that the resources are being posted on. That's
right. Someone else asked earlier, Bernie, about the 5 whys and what they are and how you use them. So perhaps you can pick that one up for us.
I think the best way to explain it is, I tend to do a lot of reading around educational theory and things like that, and it was taught to me by a really, really great head teacher. It's about unpicking and getting the real problem. So, for example, the best way to describe it is a real life example. So there's a little boy that was missing school every Tuesday and Thursday, and he was a sporty little boy, loved it, a very able little boy, but every Tuesday and Thursday he seemed to be regularly missing school. It was like, why Tuesdays and Thursdays? Is because I don't like PE. Why don't you like PE? Because you're in the football team and you go swimming. I don't like getting changed. Why don't you like getting changed? There's no privacy. Why do you want some privacy? Because you've got the boys' toilets to change in. And when we got to it, he had no underwear. And the simple solution to that was just go out and buy him a load of underwear, and the problem was solved. And ask that 5 whys. Just keep asking. So why is that? So why is that? So why is that? And then you will get to the root problem. Invariably, you have to do it gently and you have to do it compassionately. But if you just try and dig a little bit deeper, it's usually they will put that stony poker face on, but very often people's behaviour is for a reason. So just apply that 5 whys. There's lots of information out there about it, but it just apply it to your most troublesome families, and you will get to the root cause eventually, which you then can tackle.
Thanks, Bernie, and a stark example, I guess, of the 5 whys in practice. So thank you for sharing that. We've got a question here about a school. This is quite a tricky question. Changing head teachers for September. The questioner says they know what needs to be implemented, but they need backing from the new head teacher, who may well have their own ideas too. What suggestions would you have to begin thinking about September, and how I can approach them, potentially with very little time to spare, to consider implementing new strategies? Scott, I might turn to you for that, if I may.
Okay, well, I'm not quite sure where you are in the order of the school, but the chances are that new head teacher is equally looking forward to the new term and wanting to steal a march on the early gains. So it's probably a conversation with one of the deputies who might start to get close to that head teacher, and work with them about the things that you want to put in place for September. That would probably be the first port of call that I would do. If not, then maybe one of the governors, the chair of governors that was on their selection panel. And if you're part of a trust, maybe there's someone in the trust that is working with your head teacher to induct them into the way of the working with the school. And maybe they can help you to make sure that attendance is a key part of the new term going forward.
Thanks, Scott. That's a helpful answer. A question here, which I might open up to members of the panel that want to answer it. It might not be a quick one, which is about strategies for working with persistently late children, and if there is any advice that the assembled team can offer. Bernie, do you want to go for that one?
Buy them alarm clocks. We've done that before. We've just bought a load of alarm clocks and give them and show the children how to use them. We have bought them alarm clocks. Persistently late children, we again just equate those days to days absence. Do something. Very often, if it's persistently late, there might be a need to access services and things like that. And if they may need a speech and languages therapist, or you need to speak to a psychotherapist, or you need to speak to a occupational therapist, if those children need that, it's a little bit of a carrot and stick approach. Well, it's first thing in the morning, we're going to do it, and we'll give you 3 weeks. And if you can get in first thing in the morning, then. But just unpick the 5 whys and try not to collect children too much, because that becomes enabling, and then they become reliant on that. I've made those mistakes, and then suddenly when you take that away, that's really hard. But the phone calls, the wake up calls, we've done that as well. We call at 8:15, 8:30, 8:45 and knock on the doors. But alarm clocks.
Thanks,
Good
Bernie.
old-fashioned ones with batteries.
That's helpful. There's a question also about a template, the letter you were talking about writing to parents, and we've shared about the new fixed penalty notice framework, and we've shared the link to an education hub piece which sets out in kind of quite plain terms what the new changes are and what they mean for parents. So schools that are on the call may wish to refer to that if they're interested. There was also a question, it wasn't reframed as a question, it was more of a statement, but I thought actually it's maybe something for us to pick up and discuss briefly here too, which was about how you actually go about building the relationship between primary and secondary schools to make the transitions. And Owen and Fiduci, you talked a bit about feeder arrangements for your schools, but are there any kind of further reflections that you have on actually making sure that you have really effective relationships with schools from either the primary school or the secondary school perspective?
I'm happy to sort of being part of the trust. Obviously, we've got a number of primary schools within the trust, and therefore that affords us the opportunity to do some closer work and sort of strategic thinking and planning with the senior leadership teams within those schools, and that's always beneficial. So, sort of at the trust heads meetings and heads forums, there's connected thinking around the transition process. All the way from attendance to the other factors that come as part of that. And I know between our secondary and we've also got St Paul's Way Primary as we're a through school. There's close work that Owen has been involved in with the attendance leads at the primary and mirroring the systems as far as possible between the primary and secondary sector. So there's sort of continuity for the families in that. There's also sort of support that we try and engage in through the local authority in terms of the relationship that they have with the group of schools, and therefore trying to leverage that in terms of sort of relationships with the primary leaders. And again, the local authority has been really helpful in making sure that there's forums that bring the primary and secondary school leaders together to really make sure that the thinking is connected and strategic. So in terms of sort of some of those tools, that's been really helpful for sort of from my perspective with the level of engagement that I have. Owen, is there anything else that you'd like to add into that?
No, not particularly. Just when we talk about like relationships between with parents and being children, there's all that it's relationships between schools as well, and having that kind of mutual going above and beyond to try and help out other people, and then they reciprocate that to you. So it's all about trying to help out each other.
Excellent. That's a really comprehensive response. So thank you both. Was there anything else, Scott or Bernadette, from other perspectives?
I was just going to add, Will, that relationships with parents and pupils is crucial, but if we're not getting the relationships with schools right, then we're probably not going to get relationships with parents right. And thinking back to Carolyn's suggestion of hard to reach schools, if your relationships with some schools are difficult, which is the hard to reach school? Is it your school or is it their school? So maybe some grown-up conversations between leaders between the two schools. I just love the idea of what Bernie was saying about working with her children as they move up into year 7, and capitalizing on a school that will do that just seems a wonderful opportunity to me. So I take my hat off to you, Bernadette, in the work that you and your colleagues are doing there. And if we could replicate some of that around the country, that could be wonderful.
Our curriculum is linked. It's a through curriculum, so that because I'm part of a trust, it links, so it does link up, and also just a bit of natural curiosity as well, really, because we've had these children for 7 years and we grow to love them and know them, and we know the families. We know our children who are vulnerable. It's just being able to pick up the phone and, oh, by the way, how's so-and-so getting on? Is there any help we can offer? And we do that all the time, because I see the head of the secondary schools all the time, every couple of weeks. So we do that regularly. Just how is so-and-so getting on? Is there anything we can do? What can we do to work together? And the parents appreciate it because they've got, because they see a familiar face very often, a face that they've been very comfortable with. And they know they're on your side anyway.
Thank you. We're stretching your all of your generosity in staying on the call slightly over time, but I'll maybe pick up one or two more questions. There's quite a lot of questions about which I will just confirm the recording will be shared, and if if Bernadette and Fiducia are happy, we'll also share the slides that that they've presented today too. And just to confirm, the new data tool that I mentioned is on the View Your Education data platform. So please look at that. I think there's one interesting question here, which quite a lot of people have liked on the call, which is about the challenge of doing some of this activity in a medium-sized primary school, perhaps with less pupil premium funding available, and if the panel have thoughts and ideas about how you can achieve some of the sorts of things that we've discussed when your capacity is stretched. Again, we don't know the context, and certainly in some of the conversations that we've obviously had to schools in trusts might be able to benefit from the kind of cross subsidy in the context of a trust. But Scott or Bernadette, did you have anything that you wanted to say to that point?
Most of the initiatives aren't cost heavy. Some of the things I've talked about the occupational therapists and the therapeutic care and the speech and language therapists are cost heavy, and that's through pupil premium. But it's the culture of the school, and it's the attitude of the school and the collegiate view of the school that doesn't cost anything. And that's helping parents through the quagmire of benefits and job seeking and things like that doesn't cost anything. They aren't. It's not a cost. It's just about the culture of the place. It's that cultural enrichment that you give the children that doesn't really cost an awful lot, but it's also the thing that it starts with TAs and my admin assistants. I'm a 230 and my other school is a 400 school, but it is about the culture of the place. It isn't cost heavy. It really isn't. It's about the culture, and it will take. It's like turning the Titanic. But you've got to be in it to win it. Excuse me for the cliche, but you really do. They have to be there to achieve. Give your children status.
All I'd add to that, Will, is I appreciate that people are going through some tough times in budgetary terms, but the other thing is a lot of this is about the goodwill and the sharing the information. And very often, a lot of these people I'm speaking to that know these children incredibly well are these attendance officers who give massively of their time and have vested interest in these children and want to see them to go on and do well. So that transition over, there's maybe bits of funding that could be used and diverted and looked at to help support this. But I appreciate that Bernadette said that a lot of it is not overly cost heavy, and it's interesting that the work that I'm doing with you and my colleagues around the country, there's no actual funding attached to that. There's not that we're not giving slugs of money for people to do projects. It's about reprioritising some existing funding. So yes, some tough questions, and I know money's tight, but some schools are doing some amazing work within existing resources.
Thanks, Scott. That's helpful. Right, the last question that I'm going to put to the panel, if that's okay, it was just a question about striking the balance between celebrating excellent attendance and set against how you don't penalise pupils that are kind of absent for unavoidable reasons, e.g. For medical or kind of illness related reasons, and that being quite a tricky balance to strike, but how you go about thinking about that. Owen, I don't know if you want to have the first go at that one.
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of the kind of like strategies we've talked about today are very much like whole school or whole year group strategies. But of course, what sits behind all of them is the individual and treating every child as an individual. And knowing the barriers they face. There are children who will not attend school because of, like you say, very valid medical reasons, and they wouldn't go through our kind of stepped process if there's medical evidence that that's available. And similarly, what we would be looking at is like, how can we adapt to support you in attending? So for example, as we know, there's a huge rise in young people suffering from mental health challenges at the moment. So we have an area of our school which we call the learning support, but it's an area of kind of 3 classrooms overseen by a member of staff for vulnerable students who might not be able to attend lessons for various reasons. And predominantly we use that as well where there are students who have had absence for any reason, and they might find the reintegration back to school really challenging. So it's about us adapting to the individual needs within our context and providing a highest level of support that we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I might draw it to a conclusion there and just thank everyone on screen for taking the time to talk about their schools, and for Scott to talking about some of the work that he's come across and has been doing too. There's a number of other of these sessions that should have gone out in sector bulletins and other places. So there will be other kind of similar webinars to these. They're all recorded and they go on the DFE YouTube channel. But as I say, this one will be also, the recording will be sent round after the fact as well. And yeah, thanks again to everyone for joining and for our assembled speakers.
Thank you.